Hey there, good afternoon traders. This is Trader Tim from over at eminimind.com doing a Monday market analysis video to get things started for the week. If we begin on the daily chart, looking at the SPX, we've finally come down not just to our 50% of the long, but more importantly to the negative 23% target. Now, if you look at this target as it relates to the 50%, you'll notice that we really didn't touch that 50%. We were just kind of trading in a range for a week or so, and the top of the range got touched a handful of times, 4 times here. Extend my box a little bit. So something like that. We touched the top of this range 4 times and weren't quite able to make it up into this like 3450 area for the actual touch of the 50. But nonetheless, every time we got up here, just shy of the 50, it was sold into pretty good, and we finally completed to what that target would have been if we had touched the 50. So that's important because a lot of the times at negative 23% targets, it's a good place to look for opposing entries. So in this case, it was a short. And at the negative 23, that means it kind of sets up a long. So at the close today, I added to some longer term long positions, being that we were at the negative 23% target of the short. So that's a potential bounce point. We are at the 50% of the long, definitely a potential bounce point. And we've got this hammer candle, which is also a potential for a move higher. As I scanned through or flipped through the 52-week highs from the last month or so, the ones that have pulled back, if I just, ACA comes to mind, a lot of these ones that have made 52-week highs have pulled back and formed similar hammer candlesticks in the context of an uptrend. And so if tomorrow we can make a move where we go above today's high, so that would look something like moving above 32.86 on the SPX, that would be a very bullish sort of continuation from what we had today. If we draw the next short in the series here, it would look like a swing high. Let me switch my tool. Swing high down to the lows. And so it's not very far from where we're at. If you notice, this next 50% short lines up with lows. That's a pretty good sort of conjuncture of things lining up with each other when you have lows lining up with the 50%. So that level will be very telling. If we just break through it really easily and then break through the 61.8 of the short, that would mean that the long down here has some momentum. And then really the last stopping point would be the full halfway back short, which is kind of right up at the high cluster that we touched before the sell-off. So with us kind of being between two 50% at the moment, it gives a lot of room for range-bound trading. It gives a lot of opportunities for gaps to form throughout the week, and we could very easily just gap through to the 61.8 on the short side here and fail that short, in which case, looking at the next long would be the way to go. But just keep in mind the full halfway back short in case we do come up and stop or see some more resistance. It kind of lines up with the top of the range up here, and this next short lines up with the bottom of the range. So, very basic support and resistance as we look to the left on the chart. Volatility kicked up a little bit, and the breadth and advanced decline line were much more bearish today than they had been on other selling days, but closing relatively bullish, closing near the open is a good sign, especially being able to close at this 50%. Now, when we get a hammer formation like this, if we do fail its low, that's a pretty bearish sign, unless we kind of follow that up with another hammer within the next day or two. Let's see if I can find an example of that recently. Nothing in the last 6 to 9 months, but sometimes, we can get a little bit of a fake out where we dip below lows just briefly and put in one of these hammer candles with a really long tail. But anytime we get a lot of stocks setting up in this same pattern and the larger indices setting up at a larger 50%, if we break that and we start to move lower, in this case because it's long, I would expect at the very least increased volatility to stick around for a while. We may not dive off a cliff and drop 1,000 S&P points, but we could certainly see some short-term selling over the following week or so, and then we would break our full halfway back here, and we'd be having to wait for some sort of longer term support where we base for a while, and typically that's met with increased volatility. So you don't really need to know exactly where the market's going to go to make money. You just have to have a few scenarios and plan what you're going to do if one of those scenarios does occur. Planning for when am I going to look for long positions, when am I going to cover my positions, when am I going to put on a hedge, what are conditions where I want to be actively day trading versus staying a little bit more conservative. Those kind of preparations go a lot further than spending your time trying to determine or predict what's going to happen, because nobody knows. Even on the cleanest looking setup that just looks picture perfect, it could still fail. And there's plenty of setups that or areas that don't look so great, and we end up following through on sort of a crummy looking setup or mediocre setup. So we do have support here below us from back in July. We have the 50% that we're sitting at, so those are two data-driven checkpoints, if you will, or check marks from the bull side. But then on the short side, we have the most recent consolidation, kind of this bear flag that's sitting just above us. So if we can break through that with ease, with one big trend day, that would, and then closing at the highs of the day, that would show that the bulls have a lot more oomph, or are pulling on the rope. If you picture a tug of war, they have a lot more strength on their side. So watch for the 61.8 on this next short as my line in the sand, and as well as I'm watching for the low of today to be broken for continuation in the other direction. So if you have questions, throw them in the comments below. I hope everyone has a great week. We'll talk to you soon.